Hello, I'm Gabriel. I'm 18 years old. Up until I was 12 years old, I lived in a small town in northeastern Brazil called Itaitinga. English is my second language, so please bear with me as I describe what happened to us. There was nothing much in our town. We had, of course, my school and the old square where there was a school of music and a bank and a gas station. But next to the school, there was an old castle. I never knew anything about it. There wasn't any reason why I would. One day at school, I heard two boys talking about the legend of Madame Araccio. The whole school believed in her, but I was skeptical. Like most boys, however, I was also curious to see if she was real. So one day after school, I called my friends Marcel, Mateus, and Sabrina. In the afternoon after classes were over, we went home and brought supplies with us: flashlights, water, and food. We planned to spend the night there as well, so just in case of any emergency, we also carried a lighter, a knife, because, well, you never know when you'll need a knife, and some money. I'm not really sure what we thought we'd need the money for, but we brought it anyway. We felt prepared to go exploring and see if this Madame was real. The castle's entrance had signs posted everywhere: no trespassing, private property, stuff like that. We found a back entrance that was oddly not locked at all. After exploring with our flashlights a bit, it was after dark by now, we found an area on the main floor big enough for us to settle in and spend the night. There was even an old fireplace in the room with dusty remains of charcoal and a partially burnt wood and ashes. I asked Sabrina to get some things for me to light the fire, but she was taking a while to come back. Marcel went exploring a bit, and I looked around at the other parts of the main floor. And then I heard something that made my heart stop. Multiple screams from inside the house. Sabrina and Mateus suddenly appeared running towards us, themselves screaming too, yet there was still this haunted wailing noise coming from the hallway. Sabrina and Mateus kept running out the back of the house the way we had come, calling for us to follow. As they ran past me, their faces seemed pale as snow in the reflected glow of my flashlight. I looked back up the corridor that they had come from, and I saw a pale creature in lady's clothes, surrounded by a faint blue light like an aura. It was coming from within her, not from any lights in the castle or any of our own lights. At that moment, I froze, and when I blinked, she began running towards me. I ran like I never ran before in my life. Fortunately, Sabrina and Mateus had already left out the back of the castle, and Marcel quickly followed me. We left there and we just kept running and running to make sure we were as far away as we could get. We all walked home in the silence created by our fear, looked around us vigilantly to make sure we were not being followed. We'll never know if that was Madame Araccio in the old castle or if it was older kids playing a joke on us. We all vowed we'd never go back there, yet still to this day, I hear her screams. So to start off, I was smaller at the time and not too strong, but still, at least in my opinion, I think I was a good runner. At this point, I always went to my friends at 6:45 and came back around 8 to 9 to do my own thing, but during the fall and winter, it was way darker than in the summer. It was fall, so the roads were still clear to use my electric scooter to get home. It's faster than maybe a 10-minute walk with headphones. It was around maybe 8:45, somewhere between 8 and 9 when I started to roll my way home. I was maybe halfway there when I was on a path that goes behind houses and just to the side of a school and some trees. A lot of the walking path was completely pitch black, and the only thing that kept me from falling flat on my face was the knowledge of where the ditches were because I go on walks often. Just at the end of the path, before you find the light of the street again in front of the school, there is the darkest part with a massive ditch to the left, with it being hollow except for some trees and some bushes covering it on the rim, and a smaller ditch to the right. AKA a perfect, invisible, and easy spot to hide from anyone without very strong light. I had just made it onto the street when I started hearing an echo of footsteps that make it sound like 2 pairs of feet. I rationalized it must be me slapping my foot hard on the concrete whenever I pushed. But I didn't push too often, and the footsteps didn't match sometimes. So I slowed down and waited a step, barely moving to listen. Stupid move. And I didn't hear a sound. A rush of relief hits me and I continue, but they start up again. During this time, I didn't dare look back. I sped up and a few seconds later, they did too. You might be thinking, how could they keep up if it was an electric scooter? But it was not very strong and all it really did was give me less work to do, but it was easy to catch up with if I wasn't using my life force to make it go faster. I was going decently fast, making sure not to look back or give any indication that I knew, and going a fairly normal but fast speed. I was so close to home and thinking for maybe a minute, this is ridiculous. You're just overreacting about an echo and you're acting like a 9-year-old. That's when I turned onto my street feeling a bit better, and the most ear-crushing tweet or whistle sound came from behind me to my right. I looked for a second to see something, but I didn't dare die looking, so I booked it off, not making a sound, rushing and almost destroying my shoes to make it home. I heard nothing except my own feet hitting the ground, and luckily the garage door was open and I rushed inside and closed the garage. The light's still on, looking out to see anybody. I never saw the person and was scared to death for the rest of the evening and the week. Whenever I went over there, I never took that route again, except for once after when someone accompanied me home. Some people say it was my imagination, but even if so, where the hell did that whistle behind me come from? Always have candy on Halloween. Halloween's coming up again. You're probably happy about this, getting candy and dressing up. Hell, you probably like to party. Not me, though. I hate Halloween. You're probably wondering why I hate Halloween. Well, let me tell you, 3 years ago, I decided to invite my friend over for Halloween. My parents were bringing my little brother trick-or-treating. I thought me and my friend Daniel would game while they were out. So I called him up and he got here in 5 minutes. Well, that was quick. Well, I didn't feel like handing out candy at my place. I laughed and then we got to gaming. Daniel was always better than me at any game we played. It never really bothered me until he started to brag about it. Beat you again, what is that, 10-0? Okay, I get it. We then heard a knock at the door. I went to check it out. I opened the door to a kid wearing a skeleton costume. Trick or treat. The kid held up his bag waiting for me to give him candy. Sorry, we don't have any candy. He just stood there and stared at me. The more I looked, the more I noticed his costume looked more and more realistic. It looked like he was an actual skeleton. The kid finally turned around and left. I closed the door and went back. I picked up my controller and started gaming again. 10 minutes later, I heard another knock at the door. We have no candy. Thinking they left, we went back to gaming until we heard knocking again, but we ignored them. They didn't stop, and I was getting pretty pissed. Go away. The knocking finally stopped. I calmed down and decided to get a drink. I told Daniel I would be back. So I went to my kitchen and got a glass of water, until I noticed that the back door was open. When was this opened? I asked myself. I closed it, but then I heard Daniel scream. I rushed to him and got terrified when I saw the skeleton kid trying to stab him. I ran over and went to kick him off, but when I did, his head came off. It rolled around for a while, but it finally stopped rolling and said, "Trick or treat." I was about to scream, realizing he was an actual skeleton. His body walked over and picked up the head, putting it back on. If you don't have a treat, how about a trick? His mouth then stretched out, touching the floor. His arms grew long. He then grabbed my friend's legs and started to drag him into his mouth. I grabbed Daniel's hand, trying to save him, but it didn't matter. The skeleton was too strong and pulled Daniel into his mouth. Daniel screamed for help before the skeleton's mouth shut. He then went back to normal. I didn't know what to say or do. The boy grabbed his knife and put it back in his bag. Before leaving, he turned around and said, "Happy Halloween." Before slamming the door behind him, I just stood there knowing that I couldn't save my friend. Daniel was reporting missing, but I never told anyone what happened that night. Who would believe me? I still blame myself for what happened to him. Now, every Halloween, I always make sure to have candy. And this Halloween is no different.